Yep, there we go. So we're good. All right, what's going on YouTube? What's going on Facebook? And let's get Instagram running. So what's going on, everybody? Hope everybody had a great week. I definitely had a great week. Let's see if Instagram video is going well. It's funny, I think I need to do an intro because whenever I listen to the podcast, I always have to kind of talk through things. It just doesn't sound as professional, which maybe I'll make an intro. Who knows? But so, lots of stuff to cover today. My goal is to be able to cover 50 minutes of the story, but I have a bunch of updates because obviously LaxCon was this last weekend. I met a ton of great people. I'm hoping to be able to go over a bunch of good stuff with that. And, you know, what's up, Parker? So Parker's actually one of the kids I'm going to talk about, but I'll get to that in a second. But so the other first thing is you might notice if you're watching on YouTube that there's a disclosure, essentially a product placement disclosure. So I met the people from Pearl Lacrosse, so Guardian Sports, who make the Pearl lacrosse ball. And when I found out that the Pearl was coming out like 3-4 years ago when I was at Grandview, we ordered like 10 buckets of those balls. And if you've ever been acquainted with 3D lacrosse and you know Logan Bobzine, I remember of one game we had where as we were playing, one of the guys was thrown in a greaser, and he was like chasing the ref down to make sure that they switched out that ball. So basically, this is kind of my endorsement of Pearl. I use their balls, but so basically, if you use the code POWLAX, you get 10% off of whatever you buy on the site, and then they kick back a little bit of the percentage to me. So that's something that's kind of new to the channel. I'm not really new to doing it, but I have to kind of say what it is. But so there's going to be a little bit more affiliate marketing links. It'll always be stuff that I use, never anything that I wouldn't basically tell you to do. I've actually had a few people hit me up wanting me to endorse their products, and I definitely, I won't endorse anything that I don't actually use. So Pearl was the first one that made sense. What's up, Jack? So Jack's another person who I'm going to be talking about in a second. Jack runs Two Wolves Lacrosse up in New York, and we met in the lobby and at LaxCon, and we have very, very similar stories, which I won't go into, but his stuff is great. If you haven't seen him on Instagram, hit up his Instagram. He's always he's always got great things to say to his players, and he is a very good motivator. But so if you haven't checked him out, definitely check him out. Okay, so let me get to my notes so I know where we're going to go. But so if you do not want to hear anything about LaxCon or have any of the updates, just skip ahead to 10 minutes in. So we're already 3 minutes in, which means I have 7 minutes to kind of go over some of the stuff from LaxCon. So here we go. Also, as I do that all the time, as I have been listening to the podcast, I've recognized a couple things that I'm going to work on. If you haven't ever been on the podcast before, the podcast is so that I can learn to articulate my ideas a little bit better, so that when I'm explaining them to kids or when I'm giving any kind of talk, I can go through them quicker so that I will be more effective and I won't waste as much time trying to navigate a bunch of stories. I will kind of have my stories. But so one of the things I noticed that many of the people who I like do is they all have their own stories that they tell. And so my ability to go through my own story and find those things, those stories are what I'm doing with the live stream right now. So as much as I got my first fan of the live stream at LaxCon as well, which was very, very cool. And it kind of took me by surprise because people usually talk to me about the videos, but he was like, I love the live stream. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. But, I got to stop saying was one thing, and then I'm getting a little bit better. But so at 10 minutes, we'll be going into the story. We're going to pick up where we left off last time, and I'm just going to kind of go over some LaxCon stuff. But one of the things that's going to go through this live stream, and it's kind of insane that it would hit in the same time as LaxCon, is Serendipity. So I'm going to tell a couple of stories about the trip to LaxCon, and they all have one thing in common: the random nature of meeting someone when you have enough time to actually get to interact with those people so that you can actually communicate and kind of have a relationship. So I met a bunch of people. I want to make sure I call them out now, but there are a couple that I want to like kind of highlight. But so first one, Ryan Thayer of Vintage Lax. I met him on, I think, the first or the expo day. He's a great guy. He runs Vintage Lax, and so he pulls up a bunch of old lacrosse stuff. If you remember Bacharach, he has permission to kind of use their logos and stuff to bring up some old stuff. So if you like vintage stuff, hit him up. Also, Lars from Sidewall Jedi, I got to meet him, and I got to help him film his presentation. His presentation was amazing, and I'm glad I got to see it before I do my lacrosse sticks, like your starting lacrosse stick, because the way he explained some things I'm definitely going to use. I think there is a good definition of whip, though, Lars, if you're watching. So I think there's a very good definition of whip, and I will go over that in that video. Next, so this is one I want to highlight. Actually, let me get to the other ones. So there's going to be another podcast that hits probably tomorrow about a kid named Parker. And so Parker is a kid who met me when I was standing at the Pearl Lacrosse booth. But Parker's story was pretty incredible. And the effect that lacrosse tricks had on my life, he took when he got injured his freshman and sophomore year. So there'll be more about that within the podcast. But so get ready for that. That's one that was probably my most meaningful interaction at LaxCon. Then you've got Jack from Two Wolves Lacrosse, who I mentioned earlier. We met walking in. I was going to like a gas station to get bread because I always like to have something to eat in my room. And as I'm walking out, I saw him and we just started chatting it up. And our stories are so unbelievably similar as far as when we, something that we'll get to later, and I'm not going to I can't talk through the story too much, but our stories are very similar, and it was incredible to sit there and talk with him because he has a mindset that is just incredible, and it really relates to a bunch of the other people that I met. The next person that I met and I'm really excited about was Alf. He makes the lacrosse sticks, and I got to actually not interview him, but I got to record him speaking about the game for my So Your Kid Wants to Play Lacrosse series. I also got to film ECD Greg and Jake from Jake from String King. So that stuff's all coming. Very excited about that. I feel like I'm rushing and I shouldn't. The next person that was very cool to meet was Hayden. So Hayden is, I don't know how old he is, but he's basically a young lacrosse player who is documenting his journey as he's learning the sport. He picked it up like a year ago and he's already a stud. But so as I met him, I didn't recognize that it was him. I was in kind of my business mindset, where in the same way that as I met Lars at the IMLCA convention, I was just kind of like in my mindset and I didn't recognize that it was actually him. But so he's someone to look out for because he's getting in on documenting what he's doing so early. And, his parents are great. I'm super excited because, as I saw him, his mom was like, no, you follow him, like as in following me. And I kind of just thought of him as a fan, not another creator. And so it was very cool to kind of meet him. We were kind of in this awkward stage of like, I didn't know who he was, but it was a very cool experience. And so look out for Hayden. I'm not exactly sure what his handle is. I think it's actually just Hayden Lacrosse. But so Deemer Class has mentioned him a couple times. I think Deemer's most recent post is actually of him. But so go follow Hayden if you haven't yet. The next two people I want to give a shout out to is Jesse James West and Stelios. I don't know how to say your last name, dude. It's like Crowdis or something. But so they make the content about being a Division 1 or Division 3 lacrosse player. So they kind of do day in the life vlogs. And we had a very cool interaction. Hopefully I'll make the vlog and that'll be kind of cool. But so it's amazing how tight-knit our community is and how awesome it was to interact with all of those people. That's as much as I'm going to go into. So we're going to get into another LaxCon story, but it's going to lead us into where we left off with my lacrosse story. So I am someone who believes in everything happens for a reason. I believe that when I was walking down through the lobby, I met Jack for a reason. I believe we met in that environment with no one else around us for the reason that we could have the 20-minute conversation that we had, because we got to kind of dive into a lot of what matters to us in a way where we didn't have anyone around us, and it was just a great experience. Now, when I was flying back, I remember Wendy saying to me, "Why are you taking 3 flights to get home? Is there anything else you can do?" And I kind of thought, I don't know that that's it, but I saw a couple different planes, and I didn't realize that it was 3 separate flights. I just kind of messed it up. But so if you've ever had to have an overlay, or on Southwest, is that what they call them? An overlay? I don't know. But Fabian, I will get to your question in just a minute. Is it an overlay? I don't even know if it's called an overlay. Okay, that's going to mess with me. But when you log in on Southwest, you have to time it up. So 24 hours before your flight, you need to make sure you check in so that you don't get C58 boarding and have to sit in the middle between 2 people, because sitting in the middle seat sucks, right? Everyone knows that. That's just what it is. Now, when you log in and you have a layover, that's what you call it, you get to be in the A group for the second flight. And so as you're in the A group for the second flight, you obviously get to board early. But so I didn't even realize that I was flying from Philadelphia to Atlanta to Austin to Denver, and from the Atlanta to Austin and Austin to Denver flight, I wasn't going to have to deboard. And so I'd done that once before, but this time when I got on, I was in the A group, so I got to sit basically wherever I wanted. So the immediate thing I did was I picked the seat in the exit row that doesn't have a seat in front of it, so you can kind of spread your feet out, right? Most leg room in the flight. And as I sat down there, I realized that I couldn't put my bag under the seat in front of me, so I was going to have to move at some point anyway, and I don't like putting my bag in the upper bin. I just don't, and because I bring my computer on the flight, and so I ended up moving just to the back, even though I could have sat anywhere on the plane. And I fly from Atlanta to Austin. I'm sitting in the back of the plane I like the window seat, so I take the window seat. And as everybody's deboarding in Austin and then reboarding, another gentleman who was on the same 2 flights that I was, he came up to me and he's like, you can move anywhere, right? Like, the best seat in the house is open. Like, you can go sit in the exit row behind the one where there's no seat in front of you. You can have all the legroom you want. And I told him, I was like, I actually sat in that seat when we were flying from Atlanta to Austin, but I didn't take it because I couldn't put my bag there, and I usually sit in the back. And if you're in the back of a plane, you have the best odds of not having someone sit in the middle of your seat. And so as I'm in the back for the second flight, which I could have also sat anywhere I wanted, a guy comes up and he asks me, "Hey, is it okay if I sit there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And he sits down and he has a book in his, and the book is titled "How to Un-F Yourself." Right. And so he's talking. And so I asked him, I'm like, "Man, you're going to have to tell me about that book." And I realized that the book is by the same author of another book that I've read, which is called The Art of Not Giving an F. And so we just began talking, and me and him had the most incredible conversation about life, about how we both quit drinking, about, he had a very traumatic experience back in the day. He actually played football at Duke and was there when the whole Duke scandal went off. So we talked about that. And it was the first ever time I'd had a flight where I talked to a complete stranger for the entire time. But so in the same manner that I met Jack in the lobby and met this guy in the back of this plane and had this amazing conversation, that's how I ended up being able to play or to coach under Jamie Monroe, because, and we'll kind of get into the story as we go, but those like serendipitous situations have always seemed to happen to me. And I feel like they are because of a mentality that you have about life and about, where you want to go. So when you see something that will help you get to those places, to act on those things. So I'm going to tell another quick story about LaxCon. So the last day I was there, I didn't realize how little there was to do at LaxCon on Sunday. So I had a flight at 4. And so I went and I walked around the city, and I wanted to excuse me, I wanted to use my new camera and do some cool things with it. So there's a thing, I guess, called a hyperlapse, where essentially you lock in on one thing and then you can walk around and it time lapses, but the one thing you have stays in the center. So I did that on, I forget what the building's called. Either way, I did it on a building, then I did a time lapse. And as I was trying to pull that video and post it onto TikTok, a guy was walking by and I needed a song. And so I'm like, hey man, what's a good song for Philadelphia? And this guy heard What's Wrong with Philadelphia. And he went into a complete tirade about racism, about how the white people owes him something, about how if he stole something from me, I would get it back, and therefore, because of white ancestors, now he is owed something. And anytime I tried to ask him a question to further his thinking, like, so he also said that he doesn't believe in God, and I've never been a religious person, and I know I'm kind of getting into the weeds with some political and some religious stuff here, but bear with me. I'm just trying to make another point. But so I wanted to ask him what he felt about other people of his culture who believe in God. And does that kind of, does he ever ask himself why those people who have the same attributes as him think in a different way than him? But he wouldn't let me talk at all. He was very negative on what he was thinking. And so it was funny because the person who I met on the plane was of his nationality, of his culture, and he was very positive minded. And so I think that there's so much that goes into having an aim in life, and really the way you perceive the world and what the world will give you is what the world's giving back. So there's a story, and it's about a guy who works at a gas station. And so he's working at a gas station, and a lady walks into the gas station, and she's like, hi, I'm going to move here pretty soon. What are the people around here like? And he's like, well, what are the people from where you're from like? And she's like, oh, they're awful. I really don't like them. Like, they're all very mean. And he's like, well, people over here a lot like that too. And so then the next week, this guy walks in and he's like, what's going on, man? Like, hey, what are the people around here like? And he's like, well, what are the people around where you're from like? And he's like, oh, they're great. They're awesome. They're always very helpful. They're very nice. And he's like, well, people around here are pretty much like that as well. And so the key to the story is the fact that whatever you essentially project into the world is kind of what you'll see back. And so I think that that's a very important thing to kind of know where you want to go and to really have an aim, because when you have that aim, serendipity happens all the time. And that's really going to be one of the main things that I focus on as I get into the story. So we're getting into the story. Sorry, it was at 15 minutes, not 10 minutes, or 17 minutes, not 10 minutes. And so where we left off was I had just read a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, which was given to me by UM Townsend at Ridgeview. UM Townsend is just an unbelievable person, and it gave me the wherewithal and the poise to want to quit my job and at Ridgeview Academy, which is a youth correction center, and pursue lacrosse full time. So there are a couple reasons why I was able to do this. First, I had no overhead. Like, I am not that good financially. Like, I don't know how to manage my money very well, but I was living with my mom and I didn't have any overhead. So I didn't have many bills or anything of that nature. And so Gary Vee talks about that all the time, where if you're not happy where you are and you want to move to something better, look at what you're buying. You don't need to buy a bunch of crap and like new Yeezys or new whatever if it's going to not let you build the business that you want. And so his thing is always in this business sense, but really if you like, we don't need very much, And so I think that was just a good situation where I was able to quit my job and start building. And so the first thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to create custom mesh. And I created a bunch of breast cancer mesh where I had the little pink flag in it, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And I decided I was going to donate to a breast cancer foundation in Pennsylvania. And it was really on the back of the, what's it called? Toms. Toms are the shoes. And so it's funny because that was my first intention. I thought to myself, oh, people are going to love this because it's for a good cause and yada, yada. And Gary Vee calls those people out, and it should call me out too, because I was totally in my head thinking I'm going to kind of show this positive attribute of I'm working for charity, but then, it was taking from my margins, but it was a ploy. It was something to try to get people to take what I was creating, even though there wasn't too much value in what I was creating. It was, in a sense, it was a con. And it was me being young and naive and not really understanding the fact that in order to do something well, you have to put as much value as possible into it. And so that was one of the things, and I eventually stopped doing that, and I just made it about business, and I ended up doing, just creating a lot of cool custom mesh. If you've never seen any of my custom mesh, check out my Instagram and just scroll down. There was a bunch of really cool ones I did. I did I want to say an autism. I'm not sure if it's autism actually right now as I'm saying it, because it's the 4 pieces of a puzzle. I did some very cool ones. I did one for the Chaparral lacrosse goalie up here. But so the thing that doing the custom mesh allowed me to do is it allowed me to put out a product with some creative outlets, right? So I created this mesh called Switch Shooter, which I think was named, I'm not sure if it was Tim Martin or the seller who named it, but basically one of the rows was one color, the other was the other color. So if you looked at it like this, it'd be one color, but then if you looked at it like this, it was the other color. So started doing that mesh, and as I am realizing that it's going to be quite a bit tougher to do this than I had thought, someone was saying, you've got to get on Twitter. And this was 7 years ago. So we're talking so it was 2 years after 2010. So 2012. So the fall of 2012. Someone said to get on Twitter because that's where all of the, business stuff is going on. And so as I'm on Twitter and I'm starting to post on Instagram and Twitter, I find that, a 3D Lacrosse Twitter page, and I add it. And about 3 days later, I see that 3D Lacrosse at Dick's Sporting Goods Park is holding a clinic for what they're starting to do. And so I'm like, I love lacrosse. I'm starting to also do a bunch of clinics and training and things like that. Reached out to a couple people, and I just go to watch and see what they're doing. But so I'm basically watching a 5-on-4 drill that 3D Lacrosse is running, and I'm just writing down what they're doing, just trying to figure out more about the game. And Jamie Monroe pulls up on a cart. What's going on, man? How's it going? What you up to? And I'm like, I'm just trying to learn, see what you guys are doing, And so we just start chatting, and he invites me to breakfast the next day, and he asked me to coach at Mountain Vista with him. And it was, kind of it was crazy, and it was very serendipitous in the same way that I was talking about the other things, because had I not quit my job at that time, I probably wouldn't have gotten on Instagram and Twitter at that time. If I hadn't have looked at my phone on that day to see that 3D Lacrosse was holding this little clinic before the tournament, I would have never gone, and I would have never been learning that 5-on-4 drill, and I never would have met Jamie Monroe, and I never would have coached with him. And Jamie Monroe is the one who really gave me my master's in coaching. And as we go through this, there was one moment where I realized now that I definitely could have gotten even more from that relationship, but we'll kind of get into that as we go, because we've got a whole big story through that. But so one of the other things that was really, it's occurring to me now, that was something that I did but didn't realize that I did, was work for free a lot. So right now, Gary Vee talks a lot about, what do you have to offer people? And one of the things he discusses about what you have to offer is, if you don't have a product to offer, you have at least, at the very minimum, your time, right? And so you can trade your time for money. And if you don't have any skills, your time isn't worth very much. But if you go and you get next to people who really know what they're doing, you are going to very much so benefit from that interaction for free. And so I remember as we were having breakfast the next morning, he's like, I really want you to come aboard and coach with me and to coach this team. But realize as we're going through the fall and things, and the winter, is that we're not going to be getting paid. And so this was when he was doing his ESPN call work. And so some weekends he was completely out of town. And so I was one of the people in charge of, getting our box practices going and doing all of those things. And it was completely for free. But the thing about that interaction with Coach Monroe was that it was a complete and utter mind-blowing experience to see all of the thought that he puts into his work and to his practices, right? So his practice plans, I learned a ton about. And then the other thing that I really loved about how he does everything, and about, I'm not very familiar with his JM3 stuff, but I guarantee you it has some of the best information out there. But everything was structured to where he is building and thinking about skills in a way that was not always, like, I never learned about it in that way. But so when we are in the box and we're doing wristers and we're learning near side, far side fakes, and we're trying out twisters and we're trying out all of this stuff, it always related back to the next drill we did. And so there's a consistency in the practices that really helped. But more than that, there was just a technical knowledge of the game that was there. And so another memory of him that I have that is kind of a secondhand memory is my coach in high school, Coach Genova, coached with him at DU at some point as well. And so I remember learning how to throw a hitch in high school at a DU camp, and then in the hallways at Smoky Hill High School. And then when I talked to him when we were coaching together, he was like, yeah, and that's actually not even really how you do it. And so what was the hitch actually came to become called a slide dodge, where you just kind of like, he calls it a double threat position, where you're kind of ready to pass but also ready to dodge. And he's just kind of, you shuffle, and you get as close to them as you possibly can. And at some point, they're not going to let you move anymore, but you time up their first move where they're trying to jam you, the defenseman tries to jam you, and you go right by him. And so just another thing I learned from him. But so the cool thing about the experience with Coach Monroe was that every day in practice, I got to watch, a master at work. And so whether it was the little cues he gave to people, the one thing that he said about me when I ended up leaving was that I was, I needed to find that authority figure person, because as an assistant coach, I kind of got to joke around with the guys. I was much younger, and that was one thing that I still have to kind of work on and be able to do. But so as we were coaching together, Coach Monroe was building out 3D lacrosse nationally. And so Mark Goodrich was coaching with us, and there were a couple of others who would coach on the varsity team and would basically be learning from Coach Monroe. And the one thing that I realize now, like I was saying, was that all of that free time that I gave was building out my coaching prowess. And there's nothing better if you're trying to get better at something than going and working with someone who is that professional person. So I've always had the passion of like wanting to know why things happened. And it was like a, what do they call that? Like a fiber connection to the, the finer points of lacrosse when I was working with Jamie, because he's so analytical and he knows how to explain things in this way. And it just like, it went right into my brain and was just like I knew why we were doing everything, and it just, it was a very, very cool experience. But so as we were coaching together, another thing that I feel I definitely have to mention was that when you get to the higher levels of lacrosse, and so obviously Coach Monroe was the head coach at DU, and as he was outlined, so let's take one thing at a time. So first off, game planning. Every time we would walk in to game plan for another team, everything was listed on the board, from, how long warm-up was going to be, to what we were doing on offense, to what we were doing on defense, to what happened if this kid has the ball and we are in this situation. He would name out every single thing, and we would go over it individually. And so now I do that same thing where we highly overview everything that could possibly happen. The other thing that I learned was that substitutions matter. And so I had the pleasure of running the box for Coach Monroe each game. And if I screwed up, it was on me. And so when a kid was on the field who shouldn't have been on the field, got on, that was my fault. And he let me know. And I appreciate him letting me know is the thing. And it was a shock to me at first because, I think that there are some pleasantries that happen, but if you're in a competitive sport and you're in a competitive thing, those pleasantries, they kind of go out the window. It's do your job. Just like Bill Belichick says, do your job. If your job is to make sure of who goes on the field, you do it. So I missed basically the entirety of the Mountain Vista lacrosse games that year while I was standing by the midline. Because if you're running the box, you can't watch the game. You're not allowed to watch the game if you're running the box. You literally have to be looking at the players the whole time with a decent reference of what's going on in the game. And so as a player comes off the field, you need to check with them. Hey, how long do you need? 20 seconds? Okay, when you're ready, you come back to me, you let me know. And then the people who are waiting, it's if this happens, you're going. If this happens, you're going. And you allow their ability to read the game and read the play to dictate kind of what is going to happen. You have to build that trust as you do it. But so that ability to run the box effectively was tough. And I remember, so the other thing that he would write on the boards was which lines were going to go. And against certain teammates, against certain opponents, he would pretty much eliminate the entire second line. Like he would put someone in the game and he would be like, oh, why is he in there? And then he would come up to me and be like, Chapel, why is he there? And I'm like, he was on line 2, I swear, that's who it was. And then as we went through it, and I walk up to him, I'm like, okay, well, who do you want? And I'm like, what do you want me to do? And he's like, just come and talk to me every single time. And so every single time anyone made a change or we went to the defense or the offensive end, who do you want me to send next time? And then, it's, hey, I want Hancock to go. And then I'm like, okay, well, he can't go right now. Like, who is it? And he's like, okay, so it's Davis Barker or whoever else it was that was on our team at that time. It was so intense and so fast paced, but it really gave me the best view of how to manage every little thing. And I think that's something that has been hitting on a lot of, I've been seeing it quite a bit, is just that the, mediocre people can handle the general things pretty well, but excellent people handle the little things best, right? It doesn't really matter. Who was it? It was Coach Chamati at Richmond at the IMLCA convention who was talking about we want to master the middle part of the mechanic. And that's a very little thing. Like you see what's happening, or not you see what's happening. Well, yeah, you could see what's happening. But for a coach, you see what's happening and you want to give them feedback that is actionable on each item. And so, let's see. So that was one thing that I learned was that, the box really, really matters. And so another thing was just all of the little drills. So one thing that Coach Monroe really liked at least then, was drills that gave as many reps as possible. So throwback line drills I learned from him. Plus drill I learned from him. And I've modified and done certain different things that I like throughout time. So like the star and swing it drill is one that I really like that I kind of modified and got from him. And then I heard that Coach Tierney with the Denver Elite players was doing one where they were running a star drill but throwing it around the outside. So, and I kind of modified that too because I don't think they had to pop out. But so there's this, the point of this that I really liked was the fact that I had to give so much time for free in order to gain the knowledge I needed to become a better coach, and that was probably the most valuable time I had. So even if you're in a situation where you don't have the skills to do anything now, you do have time. And if you have an intention of becoming whatever it is you want to become, everything you learn within that amount of time with the person who is already doing that thing becomes an invaluable skill. So let's see. So another one of the things that happened as I was working at Mountain Vista and then with 3D. So I also went on and I was coaching at 3D. And I'll never forget this moment. So I mentioned Logan Bobstein when I was talking about the Pro Lacrosse balls. If you buy Pro Lacrosse balls, use code POWLAX and get 10% off, and it'll kick a little bit back to the channel and me. So that's another thing. But so one of my very first practices with 3D with high school level players, we were doing essentially a line drills thing where we had to integrate the skills. And I was out of my element. I had never been there before. I was a little bit shy, and I wasn't commanding like I could. And Logan Bobstein comes up to me and he says, you know when they're doing it wrong. Tell them, like, instruct them. Like, you know all of this. Like, he reinforced the fact that I knew what I was talking about and said, now coach. And it was definitely one of the coaching moments that I'll never forget, because I was like, okay, awesome, got it. Another moment from this era that was awesome was during tryouts for 3D for the very first 2022 3D team I was coaching. I was so ingrained in the idea of coaching and using new ways in my head to coach the new skills that I learned how to articulate them in a better way through watching Jamie and Logan work. And when we had tryouts, I wanted to just teach everybody. And so at a certain point, as Coach Monroe is kind of watching me and allowing me to do my thing and do things that were a little bit outside of what the 3D prescription was, he said, just make sure that you have them compete. Your job is to find who the best players are. And so at that point, it wasn't about teaching. It was about really finding and narrowing down exactly who was what. So I got to add it because Jack always has good stuff to say. Jack from Two Wolves Performance, follow him on Instagram, just said, Bill Parcells used to say, you're either coaching it wrong or you're letting it happen. Yep. And then he put a little dart emoji right in the bullseye. And that's exactly right. And here's the one thing from coaches that when I hear it, I go, gosh, like, duh, of course. That's not really my reaction. My reaction's a lot meaner. It's more so, well, what did you expect? And what the coaches say is, they say, I feel like I have to tell them over and over again. It's like, yeah, that's basically what coaching is. Coaching is telling someone the same thing over and over again until they get it. And you really have to, Gary Vee says it in a very good way. He's like, he gets a lot of hate because he says the same things over and over and over again. One of the things he's began saying recently is there's only 15 truths. My job is to say them again and again and again in as many ways as possible so that at some point when you're watching my content, you get it and it clicks for you, because it doesn't click for everyone in the same way. One of the things that I'm still learning this week is that kids are different. Like, I'm not a fan of getting calls from parents, but I got calls from parents over an issue from last practice, and they were right. I had focused on an element of a player that I didn't need to, and it was a good learning experience for me. And, it's amazing how much you really, like, certain expectations have to be withheld by the players or else you're going to get nowhere, right? So one of them is you can't be talking as a coach is talking. You can't be talking in the huddle. Everyone has to be aligned at the same direction. Like, the way I look at it is, if you think about a person who has no purpose, like you think Harry Potter, right? The Dementors. If you've ever read Harry Potter, and I'm getting off on a massive life tangent here, but the Dementor's kiss takes out the soul and the meaningfulness of the person. And that meaningfulness is a direction so that they are then just an empty shell with no purpose. And so if you don't have some purpose or you're not trying to find that purpose, you are, in a sense, you're not going to know where to go. And if you're not truthful about which purpose you're trying to get to, life's not going to return back to you what it should. And so if you think about that as an individual and how lost you can feel if you don't have a purpose, imagine what it's like trying to have a team that a coach is trying to have move one direction, but no one can unite around the same purpose. That's another reason why I'm excited that I went to the IMLCA convention and got to watch Jeff Tambroni talk. Because one of the things he mentioned was do things in threes. So one of my goals for our team this year is to create. So anyone who is a patron and sees my playbook PDFs, they're detailed. There's a ton of information there. That's not for players. Like, I've tried creating playbooks that are as detailed as those are, and basically I think the players get them and they go, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm not going to read this. This is boring, right? But the videos, they may watch. And apparently some coaches send my videos to players. But so being able to teach in the right way, give them something that matters, is huge. And so what Coach Tambroni said was that everything should be done in threes. So let's say you're talking about a clearing game, and I was talking about with this with Coach Calhoun yesterday. Let's say you're talking about clearing. First thing we want to be on clears is, have great vision. Quick to see the field, make sure we have great vision. The second thing we want to be is patient. We know through a clear that we can play numbers games in specific parts of the field, that we can be cerebral about it, and we can always get a benefit, right? So let's say they run a 10-man, and we're not used to being in a 10-man. There's a very easy way to beat a 10-man that's even better than the one that I had before. The key to beating a 10-man is if you can beat one person, you win. But you just got to beat that one person, and then the whole thing will cascade. But if you don't have the cerebral knowledge and know it, that's kind of tough. But so the key is to be able to teach how to play in a way that will allow players to utilize the best decision and the best decisions without overburdening them with too much information. And that's what I do a lot. Like, we'll get into my coaching at Grandview, and that was probably my biggest mistake my last year, and my the best thing I did the first year. Because the first year and the second year, we were much more free-flowing. It wasn't as, I just overcoached in the last couple of years of that. But so, let's see. So we're still coaching at Vista. The second year I was at Vista, coaching with Coach Monroe, a lot of stuff kind of changed. So in the off seasons, it was, what are we going to do on which half? I had an idea on what he wanted, and I would run one half while he would run the other. So I'd have the JV half, and I got really, I got to know those guys really, really well. And then when the spring season hit, I didn't have the opportunity to coach in practices with Coach Monroe, and that bummed me out for sure. Like, we did really well. It was a lot of fun coaching those teams, and we had a lot of great games. And I actually coached the JV2 and the JV, or the varsity 2 and the JV. We called it varsity 2 then, but so we had 4 teams. But even though I made twice as much money that year than I did the year before, I wasn't learning like I was the previous year. And so I was still running the box as well as coaching those 2 teams, but I wasn't learning as much. And so what eventually happened was, another coach was having troubles at another high school, which ended up being Grandview, and I ended up leaving to take over Grandview. And so I'm trying to think of a good way to pull in another person, but that's something that I realized, and actually that was mentioned in Legacy today, was that, and is another thing that Gary Vee likes to talk about a lot, is each individual on a team has to feel their own purpose with the team. If they don't, they won't work hard and they won't work together. Gary Vee says it in a sense of, I don't care what you want to do. I care that I know what that is so that I can put you in a place where you feel you are growing. And that's the thing that can be very tough from a high school kid to a coach perspective, because you really have to know why each kid is playing. And so what's been plaguing our area right now is that all of these kids are quitting lacrosse because they want to go play 7-on-7 football and track. And now, if I didn't think it was overdoing it, like, if you want to run track because you love running track and you want to play football because you love football more than lacrosse, I have absolutely no issue with it. But I feel that the reason these kids are doing it is only because of the the fact that they think they're going to get recruited or have a better chance of getting recruited. One of them is doing it, I hear, because he feels he might get hurt playing lacrosse and doesn't want to jeopardize a football scholarship. Now, that's granted. Lacrosse is a physical game. The possibility of getting hurt could be hurt. I get it. But you could also get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, life is not worth... No. I don't feel that it's worth it to get rid of something that you like to do for something that you're kind of like pursuing. Like it's the same reason why I won't ever sell POWLAX to anyone, I don't think, because I never want to be under the thumb of someone else. Like, hey, you got to get this out. You got to get this out. And I get that it sucks that I haven't produced another video after the 2-man game video yet, but there's something about the creative process that if I feel I'm forced to do it, I'm going to half-ass it, and I'm not going to do it as well as I can. And that just isn't it. You know what I mean? And that's another thing with just anything you do. If you can know what your intentions are and just kind of know that goal that you have and you feel like you're moving toward it, all the better. But the key for coaches is to make sure that they see that in their players, they know what that is, so that they can harness that developmental issue and pull them along. And so that's something just that I'm learning now. And at that point at Mountain Vista, I didn't have that beneficial thing that I really wanted because I wasn't interacting and learning with Coach Monroe. And so I decided to take a job at Grandview. And so I've got about 15 minutes left to hit the hour. I'm debating whether I get into the whole Grandview thing. But let me check my notes, see if I missed anything here. I think I basically hit everything that I had here. So one of the reasons I'm doing this is so that I can really narrow down the life lessons that I've learned through my own experiences so that I can isolate them and tell those stories. So the story from this little part, from the Mountain Vista 3D part, is two things. First off, if you have a goal and you know what it is and you act on the things that kind of sparkle to you, that you have the intent, right? So in this story, I downloaded Twitter, I downloaded Instagram, I started posting, I saw the 3D lacrosse post, I went to the Denver shootout, and then Jamie Monroe pulled up on a cart and invited me to coach with him. Unbelievable experience. And all because my unit manager, UM Townsend, gave me a book, essentially recommended a book to the kids at the Youth Correction Center to read, and I read it, and it was like, don't shortchange yourself in any moment. If you fear what you're going to do, go just do it. Like, that feeling shouldn't stop you from trying to pursue it. And that when you're in those moments, and this is getting to kind of the secret thing, which is put out positive vibes and positive things will happen, that is true to an extent because your perception of things will be better, but you have to put in the work. Like, if you put out the intent that you want something, say you want to be a entrepreneur, and you get you're looking online and you're trying to find things to buy and sell and flip and whatnot, and an ad comes up that has a flea market coming on, Saturday, but it's in Thornton and you're in Denver and you decide not to go because it's in Thornton. That's you not putting in the work towards a benefit that you could have. So you have to act on the things that kind of like sparkle to you. So, the other part of this is that when an opportunity to put in the work and it's not only putting in the work. When you don't have any skills and you don't have anything to offer, first off, everyone has something to offer. They just need to find it. And when you don't have the skills necessary to give someone or to provide something that someone wants, the one thing that you have is your time. So I know a bunch of people who are music producers, or they are you know, something or other, whatever you want to go do. If you can find someone who will allow you to kind of tag along, you're going to learn way more by interacting with those people than you are by watching videos or doing something else. Like the immersion of myself for free coaching with Coach Monroe in the box for Mountain Vista was the best experience I've had as a coach, because I got to learn from one of the best coaches out there, right? Someone who thinks about the game in such an unbelievably cerebral nature. And now, after gaining those skills and that knowledge, I have the ability to bring that knowledge to others through YouTube, right? And I think that's the key, is that if I hadn't sacrificed, you know, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from, you know, all of this time, I never would have gotten it. Now that's a tough thing to do. Like, you can't work for free forever, right? And so the whole working with 3D definitely helped me. But in those days, I didn't need any money because I was living with my mom. So if you have to move into a house with 5 of your friends and sleep on the floor and not buy $5 mochachinos every day to save money, that's what you need to do. And, you know, I was in an element where, you know, I was able to live with family. And that's the other thing with me, and why this whole lacrosse thing means so much to me, and why I'm so excited to do my So Your Kid Wants to Play Lacrosse video, to kind of tell people about the wholesome nature and the sanctity of lacrosse, is that because it was built within my family, and my family is everything to me. Like, I forget which animal it is, but if you've ever seen the movie Lost in Space, the way they kill the bad guy, spoiler alert, is they cut him, and he has all these babies in him. And so they cut him, and the babies break out and they eat him because they eat their wounded, right? My family's the exact opposite. If anybody's hurt, if anybody needs anything, everyone else in the family will provide that thing, no questions asked. And most people are like that. That's the thing, is most people, if you ask them those questions, and you ask them, like your neighbors and whatnot, in the same sense as the story about the guy who works at the store, and he has got the one guy who asks, what are people like? They say, they like where you're from. They say bad or good. And basically whatever you're looking for, you'll find. Yeah, I'm getting into the wins with that one. My brain just kind of shut down and was like, nope, that idea's gone. But so, yeah, I don't think I'm going to chase that. But so the whole idea was, go put in your work. If you don't have the skills to do something, you have the time. And then basically that in order, just go do things. For most people, go do things. Like, I know that it can be tough to like have that idea, but people seem to think that because they're not contributing on a certain level that they don't have anything to do. That's another person. Oh, so for LaxCon, Mike Walzach, I think is how he says his name. He's been creating content for coaches at a space in Philadelphia, and I got to meet him. He reached out to me before he really started making the content, but the content's great, and he does a great job with it. And so as I met him on day one, oh, this is another crazy serendipitous moment. He works for a guy named Dean, and he does 20 hours a week at this facility where he coaches players, and he's making this new content, and he's doing a great job with it. And as we're sitting there, as we're chatting, Dean invited us both to go to the FCA dinner. So I got to go to the FCA dinner at Maggiano's on night one, and I got to meet a coach who's working for FCA in Uganda and another who's from Kenya. And as they did grace, obviously it's an FCA dinner, so we had prayers, and one of the things that the guy from Kenya mentioned was that he feels that everybody's here for a reason, right? Not here like on earth, but here like in this dinner. And then I find out that Dean is an app developer, and so there's just these little connections that happen when you get on track with things, and it just kind of like it's a snowball. It just starts to roll. You just have to go do it, and you have to be willing to be an idiot first. The thing, and I think to end this, I'm going to tell the story of Parker, because that was my most meaningful meeting at LaxCon, and it's something where I'm going to share with you some of the audio through a podcast tomorrow of our interaction. But so I'll tell the story now because I think it will give a good, this might act as the intro into the podcast. So when I was at LaxCon, I decided to put out a post that said that I was going to be at the Pearl Lacrosse booth from 1 o'clock to, or 1:15 to 2 o'clock, or whatever the times were. And the first 20 minutes I was at this booth, no one came up to me and said anything, right? Not a single person. And so that'll be another post I make, is of me just standing there with no one coming up and saying hello to me. But so as I'm standing there, a young man comes up to me and he's like, I want to challenge you to a stick trick competition. And I'm like, done. And I didn't bring my stick out there. So we end up taking the next 5 minutes and we go and we find a stick. And so as we're trying to find this stick, we go to the Mesh Dynasty booth, and Clem from, I guess it's Pockets by Clem on Instagram, follow him as well. I don't even think I follow him, but make sure you follow him. I'll follow him after this. He allows me to use his stick. And so as we're walking, me and Parker's telling me this story about how when he was a freshman in high school, he broke his ankle. And then when he was a sophomore in high school, he broke his back. And one of the things that really helped him to keep his mental strength was watching my trick videos and trying to emulate the tricks that I do. And that while he was on the sideline hurt and injured, in the same way I was hurt and injured, and like, you know, your whole soul hurts when you can't do the thing you love. And that doing the tricks really helped him to keep his mental state good while he was unable to play the game he loved. And that to me means the world, because he found in just the connection to the stick and in his own progression as a human, in how he works with the stick and how he does his tricks, it's healing. And it goes back to the medicinal nature of the game, is that your interaction with the stick and with the game can be so cathartic in what it is. So me and Parker, we start doing these tricks together, and at first it was supposed to be a competition, right? But the first thing you say to anyone who wants to do a competition is, let's see if we can do it together, right? Let's see if you can do a trick, then I can do a trick, and then you can do a trick. And so that's what we did. And, you know, it'd be a trick, one trick, then we drop it, and then we do it, and then we drop it. And after we got through this whole, you know, doing all of the tricks and whatnot, and this entire time we're doing this, his parents are videoing us, and they're sitting there, and you know, his dad and his mom are like in awe about what they're seeing. And so once we get done doing kind of the trick aspect, we kind of just started talking. And this is the point where the podcast that I send you will be of kind of like what I said about it. And so I think I might repeat it here, so I'll have to delete this and put in the other one later, but that's just for me. But so one of the things that doing the tricks taught me was how to fail, because anytime you're trying to push the boundaries of what you do with a lacrosse stick and you're trying to do something new and crazy, you're going to drop the ball 90% of the time when you start. You have to be willing to be the fool, to look like you don't know what you're doing, in order to progress and to then become, say, the hero, the person who conquers all odds and then gets the value at the end of the road. But so the thing that I loved most about doing the tricks was that as Parker would drop the ball, he would just pick it up and he would go again. And so that's exactly what you got to do with all of those situations. You got to pick it back up and you got to go again. But the fact that that doing tricks and that the trick videos that I put out had this effect on him was one of the most, you know, I'm grateful and I'm honored for that, for the ability to have impacted someone in that way, because I know how that was for me when I was injured. And so, you know, that was just an incredible situation. And, you know, as we're talking, his dad kind of, you know, looks at me, and at one point, like, he's crying, and he says, like, I thought he was wasting his time, you know? So he sees his son and his mom sees his son. And now that I have a son, I kind of recognize this in a way that I wouldn't have last year, where they see their son hurting because he doesn't have the sport he loved, and he's doing all these like tricks and things that's kind of keeping him on track, and he kind of thought like that this was a kind of a worthless thing. But then seeing our interaction and kind of what it meant to me and how it kind of transferred through to him, he was like, you know, he found the value in what that was. And so that was just an experience that was absolutely awesome. Look for the podcast on everything tomorrow. And now, but yeah, so that was an excellent experience. The cool thing was then the next day when I was walking through the little market that they have, I think it's called Reading Market. I'm not really sure, but I got to meet them and stay there again. But so that was my most impactful meeting. And it was definitely a great thing. We got 40 seconds remaining on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, go to YouTube. Thank you guys for watching on Instagram. We're going to do another story, and then I'm going to answer. Fabian had a question, and then we've got a couple things. We got Ryan, Ali, and then Ryan said ELM principles, effort, learning, and mistakes are okay. That's exactly it. I should have known. I should have known the one eyeball I see on Facebook was Ryan, for sure. Appreciate you watching, man. Okay. So, Fabian had a question. The question is, what tips do you have for a new player in Switzerland? We don't have any proper coaches, so I'll have to learn everything from YouTube. So, here is my thing for being in Switzerland. So, first off, check out the POWLAX wall ball videos. Those will help you to build your skills, and they will allow you to, just kind of work through building up your skills. The other thing is make sure that you are just having your stick in your hands all of the time. The next thing is, and this is essentially the thesis of the third video within my So Your Kid Wants to Play Lacrosse series, but there are so many ways that you can impact the game and you can interact with the game that are not playing and being coached. So thing one that I love most and that I really learned from Coach Monroe in this whole time frame where I went from this when I was coaching at Vista was 3x, because it really gives you you just get to play and you get to learn how you interact with those people. So one of the things in that third series of learning is, wall ball, learning how to switch hands, doing tricks while you're watching TV if you don't have anything else to do, and then watching, if you want to learn how the game works, you can watch some of the POWLAX coaching content. BTB Lax has some good content. Notre Dame Lax has some good content. But as long as you can master your skills so that you don't have to think while you're playing, like if your skills develop to the point where you can play the game without having to think about your stick, that's definitely going to be something that will help you immensely. The next thing is get 6 players together and play 3x in a tennis court. If you don't know what 3x is, it's take back basketball with 3 players on one team, 3 players on the other team. You play with a tennis ball. One of the players has to be a goalie, and basically you just play to where if the defense gets the ball, they got to take it back, and then the team switch. One of the players from that team goes to be a goalie, and it's 3v2 the whole time. But within that free play, you learn so much about how to play the game that whenever you get to a point where you're going to have proper coaches, they will be able to, those skills will transfer to it. So that will be very much so that will be well said. That will be said much better in that actual video. So thank you, Adam. I'm glad you liked the story. I can't wait to get that, the podcast out. I think that'll be a very cool zoom into actual interaction, which is what I don't get enough of. And then, so how do I explain to my son what he's doing wrong without sounding like I'm picking on him, or what he could be doing better? So this one is something that you just have to let happen. So in my last clinic that I ran, a beginner's clinic, there was a kid who every single time the ball was on the ground, he would stop with his foot by the ball and he would take it one-handed and he would scoop up the ball. So his foot's here, the ball is the mic, and he would put his foot here and he would go one-handed and he would scoop it up. And it took way too much time. Everyone else would get the ball. But so over time, as he's playing, he will learn that doesn't work. And basically it's just to make sure that when he does do something correctly, that you focus on that thing. Because, well, how old's your son, Adam? And this will take a while because I think there's like a 30-second delay, but knowing your son's age will definitely help quite a bit. Because if he's 13, he's definitely going to think you're picking on him if you're nitpicking each thing. And okay, so he's 11, so he's getting there. So if he's new to the sport, the things that he will need to be able to do will come out of free play and the flow of what the game is. That's at least my thesis. There was a European lacrosse coaches discussion group post a while ago that talked about the differences between wall ball and free play, and that free play essentially allows you to gain fluency was Coach Monroe's concept. And so because of his concept of, you have to get fluency then to build the skills. So what is it? It's that free play gains fluency, and then wall ball and those skill development things give you accuracy. But, I think that definitely free play is something that has been there. Oh, so if he's really good, man, so basically how do you act? Like, I think it's a perception thing, man. It depends on how. I think you ask questions. That's what I think. If he's been playing since he's sick, if he's cerebral in any way, shape, or form, then you ask him how he thought he did, and not good, or, is there anything that you could have done better, or I don't know, something like that. Whereas you kind of put the answers on them. That's one of the keys to high school lacrosse that I found, is you really want to put as much of the responsibility on the player's shoulders as possible, so that when game time comes, you can make small adjustments, but you don't have your hands too far in it. But so cool. That's an hour and 6 minutes. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Ryan, so I think next week we're going to do the Patreon, $25 people get to basically ask questions. So Ryan, definitely shoot me an email with all of your questions before then. And then for everybody else, just to wrap this all up, I saw Pearl people at the IMLCA convention. We are doing some affiliate marketing stuff now. So if you want the best ball in lacrosse that won't ever grease up, that you can basically use for as long, the trouble you're going to have is keeping the balls, not the fact that the balls are greasers, but you're never going to have to worry about greasers. You can use the code POWLAX on ProLacrosse.com, and basically you get 10% off, and they kick a small percentage to me. Apparently I have to say that every time because YouTube kind of like makes you, but I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Hit me up on any social media, and yeah, have a good one. I will talk to you guys later.